The staff were at their wits' end. Not a single soul could make sense of the wealthy German standing before them. That is, until the cleaning lady stepped forward, offered him a warm cup of tea, and spoke to him in his own tongue. The scene that followed left the entire room speechless. The Imperial Maritime Hotel was exactly the sort of establishment where the fantasies of the elite were erected upon the backbreaking labor of the invisible masses. Its marble floors gleamed like polished mirrors reflecting crystal chandeliers with price tags higher than what most of the staff would earn in a lifetime. It served as a sanctuary of opulence, a place where tycoons, diplomats, and stars sought asylum from the gritty reality outside. And within these hallowed halls, Yoda was nothing more than a ghost. For years, she had scrubbed suites she could never dream of affording. She knew the hotel's anatomy better than anyone. Every stubborn stain, every high-maintenance guest. Her hands, weathered and roughened by endless toil, carried stories no one cared to read. Yet, not a murmur of complaint ever crossed her lips. She had learned early on that gripping was a privilege reserved for those with full pockets. The poor simply couldn't afford the luxury. That morning, as she dragged her mop across the East Wing corridor, the shouting began. It wasn't the sound of pain or terror, but the raw, jagged noise of pure frustration. The commotion drifted from the main lobby, sending a cold shiver racing down Yoda's spine. In all her years of service, the front desk had never sounded this chaotic. She peeked around this corner, keeping herself hidden behind a massive potted palm. The sight that greeted her froze her in place. An elderly gentleman stood before the reception desk, his gestures wild and desperate. His hands fluttered through the air like birds caught in a gale struggling to convey a message that was landing on deaf ears. He spoke a language that felt both harsh and lyrical, his words dropping like heavy stones into a pool of absolute confusion. Camilla, the receptionist, looked like a deer in headlights. Her fingers hovered shakily over her keyboard, utterly lost. "Sir, please, I don't understand," she stammered repeatedly, her voice cracking with every failed attempt to calm him. The man tried again, slowing his cadence as if that might unlock the barrier, but his words remained an impenetrable wall to everyone in the room. Rodrigo Mendoza, the hotel manager, stormed out of his office like a Category 5 hurricane. He was the sort of man who mistook arrogance for leadership. Someone who believed a three-piece suit made him inherently superior to anyone in a service uniform. His face was flushed crimson with irritation as he marched toward the front desk. "What exactly is going on here?" he barked, his voice slicing through the tension like a blade. "Mr. Mendoza, this guest arrived 20 minutes ago," Camilla explained, fighting back tears. "He has a reservation under Hoffman, but he doesn't speak a word of Spanish or English. We can't figure out what he needs." Mendoza glared at the elderly man, his expression a toxic mix of impatience and thinly veiled sneer. "Did you try a translator app?" "Yes, sir, but he refuses to engage with the technology. Every time I shove the screen in front of him, he brushes it aside and keeps rambling." Wilhelm Hoffman, as the reservation identified him, grew more agitated by the second. His eyes, heavy with decades of life and perhaps tragedy, darted around the lobby as if hunting for a lifeline. His volume rose with every passing moment, not out of anger, but from a desperate urgency that no one could decode. Mendoza snapped his fingers, summoning nearby staff. "You! Do you speak German?" He grilled a passing bellhop. "No, sir." "And you?" He pointed a finger at another worker. "I'm sorry, sir. Just Spanish and basic English." One by one, the staff faced the Inquisition. One by one, they shook their heads. For all its boasting about catering to a global elite, the Imperial Maritime Hotel didn't have a single soul who could converse with this distressed German elder. Yoda watched the scene unfold from her hiding spot, her heart hammering against her ribs. Every word the man uttered struck a chord in her mind, resonating like a distant echo from a life she thought she'd left behind. She understood. She caught every syllable, every nuance, every ounce of emotion in words that sounded like gibberish to everyone else. Yet she remained frozen, terrified to expose the secret she had buried for so many years. Wilhelm Hoffman suddenly clutched, his hand to his chest. For a split second, the room held its collective breath, fearing a heart attack. But it wasn't medical, it was anguish. Pure, devastating heartbreak. "Bitte," he whispered, his voice finally shattering. "Bitte. Helfen Sie mir. Please help me." Tears welled up in Yoda's eyes. The man wasn't raging. He was begging. He was adrift in a sea of faces that viewed him not as a human being in need, but as a logistical annoyance to be dealt with. Mendoza, having exhausted his meager supply of patience, made a call that sent a chill through everyone watching. "Get him to a room and keep him there until we can drag a professional translator in here. This is absolutely ridiculous." A five-star establishment cannot have this kind of circus in the lobby. But, sir, Camilla interjected, her voice small. He seems to need something urgent. I don't think this is just about checking in. And what exactly do you expect me to do about it? Mendoza threw his hands up, his patience completely evaporated. If he can't learn English in 5 minutes, that's his problem. Just get him up to his room. 2 bellhops stepped in to corral the old man toward the elevators, but Wilhelm dug his heels in, not fighting, but frozen with the terrified desperation of a man screaming behind glass. The words were pouring out of him now, a frantic, broken torrent, choking on sounds that were painfully close to sobs. And then he dropped it. A single sentence that made Yoda's entire world grind to a halt. Meine Frau stirbt. My wife is dying and no one understands me. The mop handle slipped from Yoda's grip, clattering against the marble floor with a crack that echoed like a gunshot. Heads snapped in her direction, Mendoza's included. His face twisted into a sneer the moment he saw the cleaning lady interrupting his scene. "What are you doing? Staring at the wall?" He barked at her. "Get back to work. This doesn't concern you." But Yoda didn't budge. She couldn't. Her shoes felt fused to the tiles while a war raged in her head, a battle she'd been dodging for years. If she opened her mouth, everything changed. If she spoke, the questions would start. Questions about her past. How a simple janitor spoke fluent German. Questions that would drag her back to dark corners of her memory she'd sworn to keep buried. But looking at that man, the raw panic in his eyes, she realized someone's wife was dying, and she was the only soul in the room who knew it. Her body moved before her brain could sign off on it. One step, then another. The lobby seemed to stretch out into a mile-long gauntlet as she marched toward the reception desk. Mendoza watched her approach, his jaw tightening in disbelief. "Are you deaf? I told you to get back to your cleaning." Yoda didn't even look at him. For the first time in years, she walked right past a direct order. She stopped directly in front of Wilhelm Hoffman. He looked up at her, eyes swimming with tears and total confusion. This tiny woman in a housekeeping uniform with rough, scrubbed, raw hands was the last person he expected to save him. Yoda took a steadying breath and spoke. "Guten Tag, Herr Hoffmann. Ich verstehe Sie." "Good afternoon, Mr. Hoffman. I understand you. Please, tell me what happened." The silence that slammed into the lobby was heavy enough to crush a bone. Camilla dropped her pen. The bellhops froze like statues. Mendoza opened his mouth to yell, but the sound died in his throat. And Wilhelm Hoffman, the man they'd treated as a nuisance, a headache, a voiceless problem for the last hour, looked at her like she was a descent from heaven. He grabbed her hands, his grip shaking uncontrollably. "Bitte," he wheezed, the tears finally spilling over. "My wife Ingrid, she is in the hospital. I came to see her, but no one will tell me where she is. They told me she was moved to this hotel for special treatment, but I cannot find her." He repeated the words, trembling. "My wife is in the hospital. I came to see her, but no one tells me where she is. They said she was moved here for special treatment, but I can't find her." Yoda felt her heart shatter. This man had flown halfway across the world to find his dying wife. He'd landed in a foreign country, helpless and trusting, only to be met with eye rolls, impatience, and cruelty. "We will find her," she told him in soft, fluent German, squeezing his hands back. "I promise you, we are going to find your wife." She turned to face Mendoza. The manager looked shell-shocked, with a flicker of something that might have been shame. "His wife is critically ill," Yoda explained, her voice steady but professional. "He was told she was transferred here for palliative care. We need to check our records immediately to see if there's been a clerical error." Mendoza blinked rapidly, trying to compute the data. You speak German." It was all he could manage. "Yes, sir." "But why didn't you say anything? We've been looking for bilingual staff for years, and you—" "With all due respect, sir," Yoda cut him off softly but firmly. "Right now, the only thing that matters is helping this guest. His wife is dying. We don't have time to waste." The words hung in the air, heavy as lead. Mendoza swallowed hard, looking visibly rattled for the first time since Yoda had known him. He turned to the receptionist. "Camilla," he barked, finding his footing. "Scour the database for any medical transfers or special care guests. Call the private clinic we partner with. Now. And you." He looked at Yoda, his expression unreadable. "Stay with him. Translate everything." Yoda nodded and gently guided Wilhelm toward the plush velvet sofas in the waiting area. The old man sank into the cushions exhausted, but a faint light had returned to his eyes. "Danke," he whispered, gripping Yoda's hand like a lifeline. "Dankeschön. Thank you so much. You are the first person who actually understands me." Yoda felt a hard lump form in her throat. "We are going to find Ingrid," she promised him. "You aren't alone, Mr. Hoffman." She paused. "Not anymore." As the words left her mouth, the bitter irony wasn't lost on her. She had spent years feeling exactly that way, isolated, misunderstood, invisible to the world. And now, by breaking her silence to help a stranger, she had unlocked a door she wasn't sure could ever be bolted shut again. What Yoda didn't realize was that Wilhelm Hoffman wasn't just a desperate old man searching for his wife, and the truth he carried was about to flip her entire reality upside down. The minutes dragged on, feeling more like hours. Wilhelm sat rigid on the lobby sofa, clasping his hands together so tightly that his knuckles had turned bone white. His eyes never left Yoda, staring at her as if she were the only lifeline keeping him from drowning. Yoda stood her ground beside him, feeling the physical weight of a dozen stares burning into her back. She knew the whispering had started. She could hear it like a low-frequency hum, questions hanging in the air that nobody had the guts to ask to her face. Since when does the cleaning lady speak German? Where did she come from? Who is she really? But this wasn't the time for a biography. Just then, Camilla came sprinting back from the administration wing, clutching a stack of papers, her face pale and drawn. "Yoda," her voice wavered. "I found something, but it doesn't add up." "What did you find?" "There is a log for a patient named Ingrid Hoffman. She was transferred from Germany for an experimental trial at the Santa Esperanza Clinic." "But looking at these documents," Camilla gulped hard, "the treatment ended days ago, and there is no record of where they took her afterward." Yoda felt the floor drop out from under her. She turned to Wilhelm and translated the news into German as gently as she could. The old man absorbed every word, aging 10 years in a single heartbeat. "That cannot be," he muttered, shaking his head in denial. "I spoke to the doctors only yesterday. They told me she was right here. They said I could see her today. That is impossible. I spoke to them yesterday." Yoda frowned deeply. "Do you have the name of the doctor you spoke with?" Wilhelm's trembling hand dove into his coat pocket and fished out a crumpled scrap of paper. He handed it to Yoda like it was his last earthly possession. It was a handwritten note. Dr. Sebastian Court. The address listed corresponded to right here, the Imperial Maritime Hotel. Yoda shot a look at Camilla. "Do you know a Dr. Sebastian Court?" Camilla went even whiter if that were possible. "I have heard that name, but he doesn't work for the hotel. He works for the clinic. He is the director of the experimental treatment program." "Then we need to get him on the phone now." "I already tried." Camilla stared at the floor. "His line is disconnected, and when I called the clinic directly, they said Dr. Court resigned without notice a week ago." The air in the lobby seemed to thicken, becoming suffocating. Something was terribly wrong. Mendoza, who had been watching from a safe distance while pretending to read a file, marched over with a calculated look. "This is getting entirely too complicated," he stated, crossing his arms over his chest. "We cannot have a guest causing this kind of scene in the lobby. I suggest we escort him up to his room and let the authorities handle it." "The authorities?" Yoda looked at him in disbelief. "This man is looking for his sick wife. He isn't a criminal." "I didn't say he was, but he is certainly not our problem. The hotel cannot get involved in medical disputes that are clearly above our pay grade." Wilhelm didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone perfectly. He heard the impatience in Mendoza's voice, the desire to sweep him aside like he was just another nuisance. His eyes sought Yoda's, screaming a silent question. "Are you going to abandon me too?" Yoda made a choice in that split second, a decision that would likely cost her the job, the stability, and the safety she had built through years of silence and survival. "Mr. Mendoza," she said, her voice quiet but steady as steel. "I am going to help this man find his wife. If that means I stop mopping floors for a few hours, then so be it." Mendoza's eyes narrowed into slits. "Are you challenging my authority?" "I am choosing to be a human being before being an employee." The silence that followed was so sharp it could have sliced through the marble floor. Every employee nearby held their breath. Absolutely nobody spoke to Rodrigo Mendoza like that. But before the manager could lash out, an unexpected voice cut through the tension. "Leave her alone, Rodrigo." Everyone spun toward the sound. A woman was descending the hotel's grand staircase. Her presence commanded respect without her needing to raise her voice. It was Doña Marisol Vega, the owner of the Imperial Maritime Hotel. She was rarely seen in the building, preferring to spend most of her time at her other estates. But when she walked into the room, her word was the only law that mattered. Mrs. Vega Mendoza went from tyrant to lapdog the second she recognized her owner. I hadn't realized she was even in the building. Doña Marisol glided down the final step and made a beeline for Yoda. I heard everything from the landing, she said, and what I saw has given me plenty to chew on. Her eyes sharp as a raptor's scanned Yoda with calculated precision. So you're the cleaning woman who speaks German? Yes, ma'am. And you intend to help this gentleman locate his wife, fully aware that insubordination could cost you your livelihood. Yoda didn't blink. Yes, ma'am. Some principles are worth more than a paycheck. Doña Marisol cracked a smile. It was faint, barely there, but genuine. I haven't heard anyone in this hotel speak with that kind of backbone in a long time. She spun toward Mendoza. The cleaner is taking the day off paid, and you will give her whatever resources she requires to settle this mess. But ma'am, is there a problem, Rodrigo? Mendoza's jaw tightened, but he knew his place. None, ma'am. Perfect. Doña Marisol turned her gaze back to Yoda. Find the woman. When this is over, you and I are going to have a chat. You've piqued my curiosity. Without waiting for a reaction, the owner strode toward her private lift, leaving behind a wake of expensive fragrance and unanswered questions. Yoda didn't waste a second analyzing the power play she'd just witnessed. Action was the only currency that mattered now. She grabbed Wilhelm's hand and hauled him up. We're going to the clinic, she told him in German. We're going to get some answers. The ride to the Santa Esperanza clinic was quiet, but the air inside the car was thick enough to cut with a knife. Yoda had secured a chauffeured town car, one of the perks of having Doña Marisol's temporary blessing. Wilhelm stared out of the glass at a city that felt alien to him, searching for the woman who anchored his entire world. 43 years, he murmured suddenly in his native tongue. Yoda glanced over. Pardon, Ingrid and we've been married 43 years. A single tear carved a path down his face. We met when we were just kids with empty pockets. We built everything from scratch. Everything. His voice cracked under the weight of the memory. When the doctors mentioned this experimental treatment, we didn't hesitate. I sold one of my companies just to cover the fees. Ingrid refused at first, but I told her there isn't a bank account on Earth worth more than her heartbeat. Yoda felt a lump form in her throat. You must love her deeply. She is my life. Wilhelm looked at her, his eyes hollow. Without her, I'm just an old man with a heavy wallet and no direction. She makes me human. She reminds me I'm more than just board meetings and assets. The car purred to a halt in front of the Santa Esperanza clinic. It was a sleek, modern structure with floor-to-ceiling glass and manicured lawns, but the vibe was completely off. It was too quiet. The parking lot was nearly barren. Yoda helped Wilhelm out and they marched toward the main entrance. The automatic doors slid open to reveal a ghost town of a lobby. A young woman, the only soul in sight, looked up from the reception desk. Her badge read Fernanda Rios, Administrative Assistant. Morning. How can I help? We're looking for a patient. Yoda didn't wait for pleasantries. Ingrid Hoffman, transferred from Germany for treatment under Dr. Sebastian Kurtz. Fernanda's face went pale instantly. Her eyes widened, swimming with genuine fear. You know Mrs. Hoffman. That's her husband. Yoda gestured to Wilhelm. He flew halfway across the world to see her, yet nobody seems to know where she is. Fernanda darted nervous glances left and right, checking for invisible eavesdroppers. I shouldn't be telling you this, she hissed, but something incredibly dark went down here a few days ago. Yoda's pulse began to hammer. What do you mean? Dr. Kurtz didn't resign. He vanished. And he took several patients from the experimental program with him to an undisclosed location. There's no paper trail. Everything was off the books. Ingrid Hoffman was in that group. Fernanda nodded slowly. She was the prize patient of the program. Her condition was the most critical, and her payment was the highest. Even without the language, Wilhelm caught the terror radiating from the girl. He gripped Yoda's arm, his fingers digging in. Was ist mit Ingrid passiert? He begged. What is she saying? What happened to Ingrid? Yoda froze. How do you translate a nightmare? How do you tell a man who crossed oceans that his wife was stolen? We are still finding out was the only lie she could manage. Fernanda kept checking the door, panic rising. You need to leave. If anyone sees me talking to you. Who? Yoda pressed her. Who doesn't want us talking? I don't have names, but there are powerful interests involved. That experimental program was a cash cow. Money from desperate families willing to pay any price for a miracle. The reality hit Yoda like a bucket of ice water. This wasn't a clerical error or a lost file. This goes way deeper than just missing records. Yoda leaned in, invading Fernanda's personal space. I need the truth. All of it. Right now. Look at him. He's on the edge of losing the only person that matters. If you know anything, even a scrap of info that could help, speak up." Fernanda froze, caught in a silence that seemed to stretch on forever. Finally, her hands shaking, she fished a crumpled card from her uniform pocket and slid it across the counter. "That's the last place I saw them transferring patients. I don't know what goes on in there, but if his wife is still out there somewhere, that's the spot." Yoda snatched the card. The address pointed to the fringes of the city, a district completely off her radar. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't." Fernanda recoiled from the counter like it was hot. "Just don't tell anyone you got this from me. I've got mouths to feed. I can't lose this paycheck." Her voice, cracked eyes welling up. "Just go, please, before management sees you." Yoda gripped Wilhelm's elbow, steering him firmly toward the exit. The old man didn't question it. He just followed, putting blind faith in this stranger who'd dropped into his life to save him. Back at the car, Yoda handed the location to the driver. She turned to face Wilhelm. "We might actually find Ingrid," she said, switching to German. "But I need to be straight with you. We're poking a hornet's nest here. Powerful people don't want us digging up these answers." Wilhelm met her gaze with eyes that had witnessed wars, market crashes, and the absolute worst humanity had to offer. "The risk is irrelevant," he replied, his voice steady as stone. "Ingrid is all I have. I'd walk through hellfire to get her back." Yoda nodded. "Then we do this together." The engine roared to life, pulling them away from the clinic and into the unknown. As the city skyline faded in the rearview, Yoda couldn't shake the gut feeling that every mile wasn't just bringing them closer to the truth about Ingrid Hoffman, but also dragging up her own buried history. Old ghosts she thought were dead and gone, ready to claw their way back to the surface. The car wove through tightening streets, leaving the polished city center for rough neighborhoods Yoda couldn't place. Wilhelm sat in silence, staring blankly at the passing blur outside the window. He was physically there, sure, but his spirit was miles away, stuck in the past with his wife. Yoda watched him peripherally, feeling the heavy gravity of his grief. She knew that weight. She'd carried it herself years ago, back when the universe decided to strip away everything she held dear. The driver pulled over at a dive cafe on a neglected corner. "Need gas," he grunted. "Gonna be a few minutes." Yoda glanced at Wilhelm. The old man was shivering, even though the air wasn't cold. It was the shake of pure exhaustion and fear, a body running on fumes and hope after traveling thousands of miles. "Sit tight," she told him in German. "In it. I'll get you something." Wilhelm gave a weak nod, too drained to argue. Yoda stepped into the cafe. The joint was humble scuffed wooden tables and the grounding smell of fresh brew. A woman stood behind the counter wearing that weary but genuine smile you only see on people who've spent a lifetime serving others. "Afternoon. You got tea?" Yoda asked. "Chamomile mint and a house special with honey and cinnamon." "Give me the special. Make it piping hot, please." While she waited, Yoda took a second to breathe. Her hands rested on the countertop, hands that had scrubbed floors for a living for years, the same hands that were now holding a desperate man's last hope. When exactly did her life flip upside down? The waitress came back with a steaming mug featuring hand-painted roses. Delicate spirals of steam rose up, carrying the sweet scent of honey and the kick of cinnamon. "Here you go. It's got magic in it, you know." The woman smiled kindly. "My grandma used to say a hot cup of tea can fix even the most broken heart." Yoda paid up and thanked her, feeling a lump form in her throat. If only it were that easy. She got back in the car and slid in next to Wilhelm. Gently, she offered him the mug. "Here, you need to warm up from the inside out." Wilhelm stared at this cup like it was an alien artifact. His hands, weathered by time but still capable, cradled it with infinite care. "Danke," he whispered. He lifted the rim to his lips and took a tiny sip. The warmth seemed to flush through his system. For the first time since they'd met, a faint shade of color returned to his face. "This reminds me of her," Wilhelm said, his voice barely there. "She always made me tea when I came home exhausted from work. She used to say the tea was her way of saying I love you without actually speaking." Yoda felt her eyes sting. "She sounds like an incredible woman." "She is." Wilhelm gripped the mug tighter. "When we met, I had nothing to my name. Just a young immigrant sweating in a factory, no money, no connections, no future. She was the daughter of a wealthy family. People called her crazy for looking twice at a guy like me." A melancholic smile tugged at his lips. But Ingrid didn't care what the gallery said. She saw me when I was just background noise to the rest of the world. She loved me when my pockets were empty and all I had was a heartbeat and a dream. You know the rest. We built this whole dynasty brick by brick. Every risky play, every dime invested, we did it side by side. Of course, once the money started rolling and the world wanted to pin a medal solely on my chest, truth is without her, I'd still be just another lost kid on a factory floor. Wilhelm locked eyes with her, fighting back a rising tide of emotion. That's why I have to get her back. It's not just about saving my wife, it's about saving me. None of this wealth matters if she's gone. Yoda felt the dam break. Tears tracked silently down her face as she held the old man's gaze. "We're going to find her," she vowed. And for the first time she actually believed her own words. "I swear it on everything I own." Wilhelm reached out, covering her hands with his own. "You're not like the others," he said. "It's not just the language. You understand the ache. Why?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy as lead. Yoda took a slow, deep breath. She'd buried that part of her life so deep she almost forgot it was there. But this man had laid his soul bare. He deserved a piece of the truth. "Because I've lost someone too," her voice cracked. "My mother, she was German." Wilhelm's eyes went wide. "Your mother was German." Yoda gave a slow nod. "Her name was Renata. She came here chasing a better life. Met my dad had me. She started teaching me her tongue before I could even walk. Every night she'd tuck me in with lullabies from back home, telling me stories about her village." The confession poured out, now a river breaking its banks. "When I was 12 years old, she got sick. Something rare. The local doctors didn't know what to do with her. My father looked everywhere for help, but we didn't have the cash for specialists. We sold everything we owned. It still wasn't enough." Her voice dropped to a hush. "I watched her fade away, totally helpless. Since then, speaking German just hurts. Every syllable brings back her voice, her laugh, those songs. That's why I keep it locked away. That's why I tried to disappear. The grief was just too heavy to carry." Wilhelm squeezed her hand tight. "But you spoke up today. For me. For Ingrid. Because no one should be left alone in the dark when they need a hand." Yoda stared right through him. "My mother died feeling alone in a country that couldn't understand her, surrounded by doctors who couldn't hear her plea. I won't let history repeat itself with you, and I won't let it happen to Ingrid." The silence that settled over them wasn't heavy. It was the quiet of two damaged people recognizing each other, seeing their own scars and hopes reflected back. The driver slid back in, and the car rolled forward. 30 minutes later, they pulled up to the address scrawled on Fernanda's card. It was an ancient structure on the city limits, choked by trees that seemed determined to hide it from the rest of civilization. A weathered sign at the gate read, "Villa Serena Rest Home." "A nursing home," Yoda muttered, confusion coloring her tone. She helped Wilhelm out of the car and they walked toward the main entrance side by side. The place felt desolate, like time had just frozen within the walls. Heavy drapes blocked the windows and the garden, probably once a beauty, was now an overgrown jungle. The front door stood slightly ajar. A chill ran down Yoda's spine. Something felt off. She nudged the door open cautiously. Shadows swallowed the interior, broken only by slivers of light cutting through the drapes. The air hung thick with the smell of antiseptics and stagnation. "Hello?" Yoda called out. "Anybody home?" Her voice echoed off the bare walls. Silence answered. Wilhelm shuffled forward beside her, his eyes darting around, desperate for any sign of Ingrid. They hit a long corridor lined with doors. Patient rooms. She cracked the first one open, empty. Just a messy bed and dead medical monitors. The second room, empty. The third, same story. "Where the hell is everybody?" Wilhelm's voice trembled as he asked. They reached the end of the hall, facing a larger closed door. Yoda gave it a shove. It was an administrative office. Desks buried in paper file cabinets, gutted folders strewn across the floor. Whoever left did it in a panic, grabbing what they could and leaving a disaster zone behind. Wilhelm stepped toward one of the desks. Sifting through the debris, he found a photograph. His hand shook violently as he lifted it up. "Ingrid?" he whispered. Yoda leaned in. The photo showed an older woman offering a fragile smile from a hospital bed. Next to her stood a man in a white coat holding a clipboard. The caption read, "Patient Hoffman, Treatment Phase 3. Positive response." She was here. Wilhelm crushed the photo against his chest. She was right here and she was getting better. Where did they take her, and why? Yoda tore through the stack of documents, hunting for answers. She unearthed a paper trail, medical charts, bank wires, invoices, but then she hit the cold, hard truth, a master list. Names, prices, and endpoints. A few were marked, "Treatment concluded, discharged." Others read suspended or transferred, but the ones that made her blood run cold were stamped with two brutal words, asset depleted. Oh, God. Joda felt sick. This isn't a sanctuary, Wilhelm. It's a slaughterhouse for bank accounts. They're bleeding families dry, promising miracles they can't. She stopped. Where is she? Wilhelm gripped her shoulders, his composure cracking. What are you saying? Where is Ingrid? Joda scrambled back to the paperwork. Hoffman! Hoffman! There, she pulled the folder. Ingrid Hoffman. Experimental degenerative therapy. Phase 3 complete. Status, significant recovery. Then, the handwritten scribble that stopped time. Patient relocated per beneficiary directive. Beneficiary. Joda read the word like a curse. Who is the beneficiary? Wilhelm shook his head, the confusion evident. I foot the bill. I'm the only one with power of attorney here. Joda scanned down the page until her eyes locked on a name that turned the whole situation upside down. Mr. Hoffman, she stammered, does the name Eric Hoffman mean anything to you? Wilhelm's face changed instantly. The flush of anger drained away, leaving him looking like a ghost. Eric, he whispered, the syllable sounding like it hurt. Eric is my son. Joda stared at him, stunned. According to this, he signed the transfer order. He's listed as the primary guardian. That can't be right. Wilhelm stumbled back. We haven't spoken in years. The boy despises me. Why would he do this? Why step in now without a word to me? The question hung in the stale air of the derelict office. Joda watched the old man crumble under the weight of the truth. It wasn't just his wife missing anymore. His own flesh and blood was the architect of his misery. What kind of son does that? And the real question remained, where was Ingrid now? We have to find Eric, Joda stated flatly. He holds the keys to this. Wilhelm looked at her with a grief too deep for tears. If my boy is behind this, his voice cracked, then I'm not fighting a stranger. I'm fighting my own blood. Somewhere in the city, Ingrid was breathing, but the path to her led straight through the wreckage of a shattered family. And Joda was starting to realize the Hoffman closet had more skeletons than she'd bargained for. The drive back to the hotel felt like a funeral procession. Wilhelm was mute. He was sitting there, but his mind was lost in a maze of regret Joda couldn't begin to fathom. His son, his own kid, signed the papers. Why? How? What was the end game? The questions swirled like smoke. By the time they pulled up to the Imperial Maritime, the sun was dying, painting the sky in bruised purples and burnt oranges. But the view offered no comfort, just the heavy warning of a long, dark night ahead. Mendoza was stationed in the lobby looking like he'd just swallowed a wasp. Doña Marisol requests your presence, he clipped. Private quarters, now. Joda guided Wilhelm toward the lift. The man seemed to have aged a decade in the span of an afternoon. His confident stride was gone, replaced by the shuffle of a man who had lost the war. Marisol's command center took up the entire penthouse level. It was sleek, expensive, and cold, with glass walls overlooking the sprawl. The matriarch stood by the window swirling a glass of red wine, deep in thought. But she wasn't the only one there. Slumped in a leather armchair, head buried in his hands, was a younger man. When he looked up at the sound of the doors, Joda froze. She saw the eyes immediately. They were Wilhelm's eyes, same shape, same steel gray, but haunted by a fresh panic. Wilhelm stopped dead. Eric! The name escaped him like a dying breath. The younger man rose slowly. He was tall, built like a runner, but his face carried the hollow look of insomnia and impossible choices. Father! He managed, his voice unsteady. The tension in the room was so thick, Joda felt she would choke on it. 2 generations of Hoffman stared at each other across a canyon of silence and old scars. Doña Marisol finally stepped in. Mr. Eric Hoffman arrived this afternoon looking for you, she explained smoothly. When I briefed him on the situation, he refused to leave. He hesitated. There's a lot here that needs explaining. Explaining? Wilhelm's voice spiked thick with barely checked rage. How do you explain my own son kidnapping my wife? Dad, I didn't take her. Eric stepped closer, palms out, begging him to listen. I saved her life. Saved her. You pulled her out of care without asking me. You hid her away without a word. Because that care was killing her. The statement landed with the weight of a grenade. Wilhelm stumbled back, looking physically struck. What did you say? Eric took a long, shaky breath to steady himself. Cortez isn't running a medical facility, Dad. It's a scam, I found out weeks ago. I hired a private investigator the second things started feeling off. Those reports on your desk, the miracle progress faked. All of it. Joda felt the floor drop out from under her. She translated fast for Wilhelm, watching his face crumble. Cortez isn't in the business of healing people. Eric pressed on, his voice cracking. He's in the business of bleeding desperate families dry. Those experimental drugs don't exist. He feeds them sugar pills while you write checks for millions. And once the accounts run dry or someone asks too many questions, he trailed off. He didn't have to finish. What did they do to Ingrid? Wilhelm whispered, barely audible. The minute I knew the truth, I moved. I pulled strings. I got Mom out of there before they could finish the job. She's at a legitimate facility in the mountains now. Real doctors. Safe from Cortez. Wilhelm gripped his son's arms tight. She's alive. She's alive, Dad. Tears finally spilled over Eric's face. She's fragile, but she's breathing, and she's actually getting help now. Wilhelm let go, collapsing into the nearest armchair. His shoulders heaved, releasing sobs he'd been holding back for ages. Joda moved in close, resting a hand on his shoulder. The old man looked up, eyes bloodshot but sparking with something new. Hope. Why the hell didn't you tell me? Wilhelm turned his gaze back to Eric. You let me think she was gone. Why? Eric looked at the floor. Because I didn't know if I could trust you. That hit Wilhelm harder than a fist. Trust me, I'm your father. You're the man who chose the boardroom over us, every single time. Eric's voice steadied. It was cold now, heavy with old scars. You missed the birthdays, the graduations. You missed every moment that actually counted. There was always a merger, always a crisis, always something more important than us. Eric, when Mom got sick, she called me, not you. She told me the truth. She told me she was scared. She said you were obsessed with buying the best cure, but you couldn't be bothered to just sit with her. Wilhelm tried to speak, but the words died in his throat. When I found out Cortez was a con, I didn't call. I knew what you'd do. You'd throw cash at the problem and wait for it to go away. But a blank check wasn't going to save her this time. I had to act. Then a heavy, suffocating silence. Joda watched them, two men, same blood, divided by a lifetime of missed connections and bad calls. Doña Marisol stepped in, a calm anchor in the storm. Mr. Hoffman, she said softly, he crossed the world to look you in the eye and tell you the truth. That's not hate. That's love surviving against the odds. Wilhelm looked at his boy. Really saw him maybe for the first time in decades. You're right, his voice shattered. About everything. You're right. Eric blinked, stunned. What? I failed you. I thought being a good father meant building a fortune, securing the future, bringing home more. I never realized you just needed me. He hauled himself up and moved toward his son. Your mother tried to tell me, God knows she tried, but I was too busy building an empire to hear her. And by the time I slowed down, by the time I was ready to be the man I should have been, she got sick. He cupped Eric's face in his hands. I am so sorry, son. For every birthday I missed, every game I skipped, every time I chose the office over you. I don't expect forgiveness, but I need you to know I love you. I always have, even if I was too stupid to show it. Eric broke, collapsing into his father's chest. Years of anger and missed connections poured out, soaking Wilhelm's jacket with tears. I love you too, Dad, he sobbed. I just wanted you to be proud of me. I did it all just to show you I wasn't a burden. You were never a burden, Eric. Never. Yoda looked away, unable to watch the raw emotion as the old man wept openly. Her mind drifted to her own mother, the talks they missed out on, the hugs stolen by a cruel fate. Doña Marisol slid up beside her, quiet as a shadow. You're a remarkable young woman, the matriarch murmured. This reunion wouldn't exist without you. I just did what anyone would do. Wrong. Anyone else would have kept their head down, mopped the floor, and played deaf. You made a choice to matter. As the father and son broke their embrace, Wilhelm turned his focus to Yoda. I need to see Ingrid, he stated, his voice gathering strength. I need to see her now. Eric nodded in agreement. The facility is a few hours away up in the mountains. We can leave right now if you're up for it. I am. Wilhelm gripped Yoda's hand firmly. But she comes with us. If it weren't for her, I'd still be lost. Eric looked at the housekeeping girl with a mix of curiosity and thanks. Dad told me over the phone. How did you know how to speak to him in German when no one else understood? How did you have the guts to risk your job for a stranger? It was nothing. It was everything, Eric cut in. In a world where people are trained to look away, you chose to see him. That isn't nothing. That is everything. Before they could leave, Doña Marisol caught Yoda's arm. Don't forget, you and I have unfinished business, she said, her smile needing more than it revealed. I'll be waiting for your return. There are things about your mother you need to hear." Yoda's heart skipped a beat. My mother? What could you possibly know about her? More than you'd think, but that's a tale for another time. Go now. A wife is waiting for her husband. The journey toward the peaks began under a canvas of stars. Wilhelm and Eric sat in the back, voices low, mending fences that had been broken for far too long. Yoda stared out the window, lost in the dark blur of the landscape. Doña Marisol knew something about Renata. What thread could possibly tie a powerful five-star hotel tycoon to a German immigrant who spent her life scrubbing toilets? The mountains began to loom on the horizon, dark giants swallowing the sky. Somewhere in those high peaks, Ingrid was waiting, and with her answers that would shatter their reality. Because what nobody suspected was that Ingrid Hoffman was sitting on a key secret, a buried truth kept safe for decades that linked her life to Yoda's in ways they couldn't possibly fathom. The peaks rose from the darkness, their jagged edges cutting into the starlit night. The car climbed the winding roads, leaving the city grit behind for a world of silence and pine. Yoda hadn't slept yet, her eyes were wide open. Her mind was a storm of questions. What did Marisol know? What was Ingrid hiding? How could the lives of the wealthy elite be tangled up with someone like her? The back seat had fallen silent, but the tension was gone. It was replaced by something fragile but genuine, the start of a healing process both men desperately needed. As the first gray light of dawn touched the ridges, the car pulled up to a stone lodge surrounded by ancient trees. A modest sign read, Sacred Mountain Clinic, Center for Holistic Medicine. Eric stepped out first. She's in the East Wing, he said, his voice thick with held-back emotion. Doctors say she's improved since the transfer. The clean air and royal treatment are working. Wilhelm paused at the entrance, inhaling deeply. How is she? He asked. Those 3 words carried a lifetime of love and terror. How is she really? Weak but fighting. You know, Mom. Yoda trailed a few steps behind, suddenly feeling like an intruder. This was a family moment, private and expensive. What was a maid doing here? As if reading her insecurity, Wilhelm turned around. Come with us. He extended a hand. Ingrid will want to meet the woman who saved my life. I didn't save you, Mr. Hoffman. I just gave you hope when you were running on empty. That is salvation, Yoda, the only kind that matters. They walked in together. The interior was rich and warm, a stark contrast to the sterile, cold hallways of the public clinic Yoda was used to. Plants filled every corner, soft light poured through floor-to-ceiling windows, and the scent of lavender hung in the air. A nurse greeted them with a gentle nod. Mr. Hoffman, your wife has been asking for you since yesterday. When we told her you were coming, she smiled for the first time in weeks. They moved down a sunlit corridor until they reached a door left slightly ajar. Eric stopped. You go in first, Dad. She needs to see you. Wilhelm just nodded, his eyes already swimming with tears. He gave the door a gentle push and slipped inside. Yoda and Eric stood in the hallway, straining to hear through the silence until a sound pierced right through them. First came a broken sob, then another, followed by a rush of German words spilling out like a river breaking its banks. Ingrid, my treasure. I'm here. I finally made it. Wilhelm's voice cracked. Ich wusste, dass du kommen würdest. I knew you would come. I never stopped believing. Eric squeezed his eyes shut as tears tracked silent paths down his cheeks. Yoda had to brace herself against the wall, the raw emotional weight of the moment hitting her like a physical wave. Several minutes ticked by before Wilhelm reappeared in the doorway, his face wet with tears, but absolutely glowing. She wants to meet you, he told Yoda. She's asking for her angel, as she calls you. Me. I told her the whole story last night, how you found me at that hotel, how you spoke German when nobody else could. How you stuck by me through this entire search. She needs to see your face. Yoda felt her legs turn to jelly as she stepped toward the room. Ingrid Hoffman lay in a bed near the window, the pale light of dawn washing over her features. She was a woman of fragile beauty, her silver hair framing a face etched by illness but burning with a quiet aristocratic strength. And those eyes, her eyes held. Something Yoda couldn't quite place. A strange flickering spark the moment they landed on her. Come closer. Ingrid spoke in German, her voice faint but commanding. Let me get a good look at you. Yoda obeyed, shuffling until she stood right beside the bed. The old woman reached out a trembling hand and clasped hers. Wilhelm told me what you did for him. Her eyes were glossy with unshed tears. You gave him hope when the world had turned its back on him. There aren't enough words to thank you for that. You don't have to thank me, Mrs. Hoffman. Anyone would have done the same. No, they wouldn't. Ingrid squeezed her hand tighter. Most people would have looked the other way. You chose to see him. You chose to act. That makes you rare. Her gaze bore into Yoda, studying the young woman's face with an intensity that felt almost invasive. What's your full name, child? Yoda. Yoda Castillo. And your mother? What was your mother's name? Yoda's heart skipped a beat. Renata. Renata Mueller. The reaction was instant. All the color drained from Ingrid's face. Her hands started shaking violently. Her eyes went wide, filled with a look of sheer disbelief. It was a look of shock mingled with a decades-old grief. Renata Mueller, she whispered. Renata Mueller from Heidelberg. Yoda felt the floor drop out from under her. Yes, my mother was born in Heidelberg. How do you know that? Ingrid closed her eyes. Tears streamed down her face as her frail body shook with silent sobs. My God, she murmured. After all these years, after all this time hunting for her, hunting. Did you know my mother? Ingrid's eyes snapped open, piercing right through Yoda's defenses. Renata wasn't just someone I knew, child. Renata was my sister. The world seemed to freeze. Yoda took a step back, her brain refusing to process the words. That's impossible. My mom never said a word about a sister, not once. That's because she didn't know I existed. Ingrid cut in, her voice cracking. Or maybe she did and she chose to bury it. Our family's history is complicated. It is paved with pain and secrets that never should have been kept. Wilhelm and Eric had rushed in, drawn by the commotion. They froze in the doorway, catching the tail end of Ingrid's confession. What are you talking about? Wilhelm hurried to his wife's side. You knew Yoda's mother. Ingrid gripped her husband's hand, drawing strength from him. There is something I never told you, Wilhelm. A weight I've carried in my heart my entire life. Back in Germany, when I was very young, my family hit rock bottom. My parents, they had to make impossible choices just to survive. Decisions that tore our family apart forever. Her voice wavered, but she pushed through. I was the daughter they kept. Renata was the daughter they had to give away. The silence in the room was so heavy, Yoda could hear the blood rushing in her ears. Give away! The words slipped out of her mouth like a wounded noise. What do you mean, give away? My parents couldn't afford to feed 2 girls. The poverty, it was suffocating. Renata was just a baby. They left her at an orphanage, praying she'd find a better life with a wealthier family. I was 5 years old. I still remember the day they took her. I still hear her crying in my nightmares. Tears were flowing freely now. I spent my whole life looking for her. When I married Wilhelm, when we finally had resources, I hired private investigators. I found orphanage records, adoption papers, but every single lead turned into a dead end. The paper trail on Renata went cold right here in this country. After that, absolute zero, because she didn't make it. Yoda barely got the words out. I lost her when I was just a kid. Ingrid's sobbing intensified. I know that now. The moment Doña Marisol reached out yesterday, the second she started describing your background, I knew exactly who I was dealing with. Muller was our mother's maiden name, and Heidelberg, that's where the story started and where the family fell apart. Doña Marisol reached out first. Turns out she's been digging for answers all on her own. You've only seen the tip of the iceberg, Yoda. There's so much more. Wilhelm sank onto the edge of the mattress, trying to wrap his head around the news. Ingrid, why keep this a secret? Because the shame, the grief, it was just too heavy to carry. Every time I tried to bring her up, it felt like a betrayal. Like I was judging our parents for impossible choices they made while they were grieving. She turned back to Yoda, reaching out with open hands. I see now that fate pulled us back together for a reason. My sister might be gone, but her daughter is standing right here. Yoda took Ingrid's hands, trembling. You're my aunt. The title felt foreign on her tongue, like a word from a language she'd never learned. I actually have a family. You have a family, Ingrid confirmed, pulling her in tight. No more being alone, a kid. Never again. Eric stepped up, resting a reassuring hand on Yoda's shoulder. Guess that makes us cousins, he said, grinning. The clan just got bigger. Wilhelm watched them, eyes welling up. Yoda, from the second I spotted you working the lobby, I knew there was a spark there. Something deeper than just your grit or your kindness. Now it makes sense. It was blood calling out to blood. Yoda couldn't hold back the tears anymore. She'd spent her entire life with that hollow ache of being alone, of missing a piece of herself. And in the span of a few minutes, she'd gained a whole world, an aunt, a cousin, an uncle. Yet, through the joy, a burning question remained. Ma'am. Aunt Ingrid. The correction felt clumsy. What else does Doña Marisol know? How does she fit into this puzzle? Ingrid and Wilhelm exchanged a glance, the heavy kind that signaled more skeletons in the closet. Doña Marisol didn't just know your mother Yoda. She was the one who took her in when she first landed in this country. She gave Renata her first job. They were close for years. Friends. And then something deeper than friends. Marisol was the last person to see your mother alive. And she's holding something for you. Something Renata left in her care before she passed. It's been waiting for you this whole time. Yoda's heart hammered against her ribs, threatening to burst out. What is it? Ingrid shook her head gently. That's not my story to tell. Go back to the hotel. Doña Marisol is waiting and she'll finally give you the full truth about your mother. A truth that's going to rewrite everything you think you know about her and about yourself. Outside, the sun had fully risen, drenching the mountains in a golden haze. It was a fresh day, one that started with a reunion and was destined to end with revelations beyond anyone's imagination. Because Renata Muller's story wasn't just about some immigrant who died far from home. It was a saga of sacrifice, of a love that transcended life itself. And Yoda was on the verge of discovering that her mother was a force far greater than she'd ever dreamed. The ride back to the Imperial Maritime Hotel felt unlike any journey Yoda had ever taken. She wasn't the same girl who had walked out those doors. She wasn't invisible anymore. She wasn't alone. Wilhelm and Ingrid had begged her to stay at the clinic, but Yoda knew she had unfinished business, a conversation that couldn't wait, a truth years in the making. Doña Marisol was waiting. The car pulled up to the hotel entrance, the facade glowing in the afternoon sun. Yoda took a steadying breath before stepping out. Every step toward those glass doors was a step into her past, toward answers she'd given up on finding ages ago. Mendoza was stationed in the lobby, but for the first time his gaze didn't hold that usual sneer of disdain. Something had shifted. Was it respect? Shame, whatever it was, he couldn't meet her eyes as she walked by. The elevator whisked her to the penthouse level. The doors slid open, revealing the corridor leading to the matriarch's private office. Yoda walked slowly, feeling the heavy drag of every passing second. The door stood ajar, a silent invitation, so she stepped inside. Doña Marisol sat by the window, an antique wooden box resting on her lap like a relic. When she spotted Yoda, her eyes flooded with something that looked like relief tangled with an infinite sadness. I knew you'd come. Her voice was soft, almost motherly. Sit down, child. There's so much you need to hear. Yoda obeyed, taking the seat across from her hands, trembling slightly. Ingrid told me you knew my mother, that you were friends, maybe even more than that. Marisol ran her shaky fingers over the wooden box. Renata wasn't just staff. She was the sister I never had. The woman who pulled me back from the edge when I had absolutely no reason to keep going. She squeezed her eyes shut for a second, bracing herself for the weight of the story she had to tell. Decades ago, way before this hotel was even a blueprint, I was a wreck. My husband died in a crash just like that. My only son followed him not long after, taking every last bit of my hope with him. I had money, mansions, assets, but I was completely alone, no purpose, no home. Her voice cracked a little. One night, when I was at rock bottom, this young German girl knocked on my door, asking for work. Pregnant, all on her own, and she could barely string 2 words together in our language. Anyone else would have slammed the door in her face, but her eyes, they stopped me. There was a spark there, a real fire. My mom, Yoda whispered. Your mom, Marisol nodded. I hired her on the spot. She started out scrubbing floors just like you, but Renata, she was something else. Picked up the language in weeks. Devoured every book in the library. She'd grill me about the business, the investments, how the real world turned. A sad smile tugged at Marisol's lips. Bit by bit, without us even trying, the boss-made dynamic faded away. We just became family. She gave me a reason to breathe again, and I swore I'd move heaven and earth to give her and that baby a better shot at life. That baby was me. It was you, Yoda. You were born right under my roof. I was the first one to hold you after her. I watched you take your first wobbly steps, heard your first words. In German, actually, you said Mama first. Tears started streaming down Yoda's face, unstoppable. Marisol kept going, her voice getting thick with emotion. When I found out Renata was sick, I tried to cover the treatment. I had the cash, the connections, everything. But she said no, flat out refused. It was experimental, wildly expensive. And your mother had a different plan for those funds. Marisol unlatched the wooden box. Inside sat stacks of yellowed envelopes, dozens of them. all penned in the same neat script. Underneath lay an old necklace with a rose pendant. Renata knew the clock was ticking. The doctors gave her odds but no guarantees. So she made a choice. Instead of burning every cent on a long shot, she used that time for you, to leave you something money can't buy. She picked up the envelopes, hands shaking. Letters, Yoda. She spent her final months writing these, one for every milestone she knew she'd miss. Yoda felt the breath get knocked out of her. Letters. Your first period, first love, first job. Graduation, your wedding day, having kids of your own. Every crisis, every joy she could imagine, she wrote it all down. Guidance, love, wisdom. So even if she wasn't there in the flesh, she'd still be right there with you. Marisol handed them over. Yoda took them like they were the crown jewels. In a way, they were worth more. Why didn't you give me these sooner? The question came out choked with sobs. I've spent years feeling so alone, so broken. Why wait this long? Because your mother made me swear. Marisol took Yoda's hands in hers. She made me promise to hold them until you were ready, until you found your own voice, until you showed the world who you really are. But how would you know? Renata was very specific. She said, when my daughter stops hiding in the background, when she speaks up, even when staying quiet is easier, when she uses her gift to help someone else, that's the day. The words hit Yoda like a freight train. The lobby. When I spoke German to help Wilhelm, that was it. Marisol nodded, eyes welling up. I saw the whole thing from the balcony. I saw you hesitate. I saw the struggle, and then I saw you choose to be brave. I knew right then Renata was right. You were ready. Yoda looked down at the envelopes, each one labeled in her mother's handwriting. For your first bad day. For when you want to quit. For when you fall in love. For when you become a mother. And one set apart from the rest, for when you know the whole truth. There's one more thing. Marisol lifted the necklace from the box. This belonged to your grandmother, Renata and Ingrid's mother. It's the only thing she kept from her family back in Germany. Wore it till the end. She wanted you to have it with the letters. Yoda took the chain. The little rose pendant caught the soft afternoon light. It was small and delicate, but it carried the weight of generations. Your mother left instructions regarding you as well. Doña Marisol kept talking. She explained how she'd been my silent guardian, pulling strings from the dark to ensure the paychecks never stopped coming, all without me ever seeing her hand in it. So the hotel gig, that was you. I made sure the opportunity landed in your lap right when you were desperate. I didn't want to meddle in your life, but I had to keep my word to Renata. I had to know you were okay. Yoda sat there trying to decode the sentences as if she were listening to an alien dialect. She had spent her entire existence convinced she was solitary, discarded by the universe. And now, it turns out invisible hands had been holding her up all along, waiting for the right second to show themselves. Why didn't my mother ever talk about Ingrid? Why keep a whole sister a secret? Doña Marisol let out a heavy, weary sigh, because Renata didn't know where to look. She was adopted out as an infant, remember. She grew up a stranger to her own bloodline. She tried tracking them down when she first immigrated, but a fire had gutted the orphanage archives. She resigned herself to being the sole survivor, but Ingrid was hunting for her just as hard as Renata was hunting for Ingrid. Two sisters drifting in the same city, breathing the same air but locked in parallel dimensions, until this very moment. Until now. Yoda echoed, feeling the gravity of the phrase settle on her shoulders. Fate draws strange circles, child. Your mother died searching. You succeeded. Just by being kind to a stranger, you stitched together a family that had been torn apart for decades. Yoda clutched the papers against her chest, letting the tears fall freely. These weren't sobs of grief anymore. They were a release, a cleansing rain. Proof of a love that didn't stop at the grave. One more thing. Doña Marisol stood up, crossed to her desk, and pulled a formal-looking file from a drawer. Renata entrusted this to me as well. It is the deed to a studio apartment. She paid for it brick by brick, scraping together pennies for years. It is in your name, free and clear. Renata needed you to have a sanctuary, a patch of earth nobody could ever evict you from. She starved herself of every luxury, worked double shifts until she dropped just to hand you this. Yoda took the folder, her fingers trembling. Her mother, who seemed to die with nothing, had actually left her everything. Every skipped meal, every hardship, it was all an investment in her. And I have my own offer to make. Doña Marisol locked eyes with her. Not as charity for your mother's ghost, but because you earned it, on your own. What is it? A promotion. No more housekeeping. I want you as the hotel's international liaison. Your linguistic skills, your heart, the way you read people. That is the gold this business is missing. It is what I am missing." Yoda was struck dumb. In a matter of days, the axis of her life had tilted completely. "You don't have to answer now." Doña Marisol offered a gentle smile. "Take a beat. Read her letters. Absorb the shock. Come find me when your feet touch the ground again." She stepped in and wrapped Yoda in a hug, solid maternal, carrying the weight of years of unexpressed affection. "Your mother would be beaming right now," she whispered, "just incredibly proud." That night, Yoda sat alone in the suite the hotel had provided. The correspondence lay fanned out on the duvet, paper ghosts of a woman who was gone, yet whose love was still shouting from the pages. Shaking, she picked up the envelope marked, "For when you know the truth." She tore the seal. Her mother's handwriting flooded her vision. The ink felt like a caress from the afterlife. "My dearest Yoda, if you are reading this, the secrets are finally out. You know our story. I know your head is spinning with 1,000 questions and it kills me I cannot be there to answer them. But you need to grasp one thing. It matters more than any explanation. Every move I made, every hard choice was fueled by my love for you. I skipped the expensive treatments because the outcome was a gamble, but your security wasn't. I wanted to leave you a fortress, a future, a launchpad for the life you deserve. You probably feel like I quit on you too early, and you are right, I did. But the time I had with you those early years, they were the peak of my existence. Your smile was my paycheck. Hearing you speak German was like a symphony. Every hug was the reason I got out of bed to fight another day. I never tracked down my sister. I spent decades imagining the reunion, introducing you to your aunt. I thought that dream went into the ground with me. But if Doña Marisol handed you this note, the impossible happened. It means you finished what I started. It means the universe finally stitched up the wound I left bleeding. I don't know the how or the why, but I know it was you. That is just the kind of soul you have, my love. You are the mender, the one who stitches together what has been torn apart. But there is one final envelope you must not unseal just yet. Doña Marisol holds the timing of that delivery. Have faith in her judgment, just as I did. And never forget, my little one, that solitude was only an illusion. You were never truly by yourself. I walked beside you through every stumble, every tear, and every victory. I resided in your chest, even when you felt abandoned, and I will remain there as long as you keep my memory alive. My love for you transcends language, outlasts time, and defies death itself. Forever, your mother, Renata. Jogda reached the end of the page and collapsed onto the mattress, shaking with a grief she hadn't realized she was capable of feeling. It was a purge of mourning affection and gratitude, years of emotional restraint finally breaking the dam. She had not been left behind. Her mother had cherished her with every fiber of her existence right up to her final breath and beyond. And somewhere safeguarded by Doña Marisol, one last letter was waiting. It was a message that Jogda could not yet foresee would shift her entire reality once again. The following days passed in a blur of raw emotion, revelation, and recovery. Every morning, Jogda hiked up to the mountain clinic to visit Ingrid, arms full of fresh blooms, spending hours conversing in German, the linguistic bridge to Renata and their shared matriarch. Wilhelm remained a constant sentinel by his wife's side. Eric had taken a leave of absence to support his parents, and amidst the chaos, Jogda discovered a treasure she thought she had forfeited forever: a family. Yet one seal remained unbroken. Late one afternoon, as Jogda read excerpts of Renata's writing aloud to Ingrid, Doña Marisol materialized in the doorway. Her face was calm yet heavy with purpose. "It is time," she stated simply, leaving Jogda to stare back in confusion. "Time for what?" "The final letter. Your mother was incredibly precise about the conditions for its delivery. She insisted it happen only when you were encircled by kin, when the air was cleared of all secrets, and when you could finally read her words without the crushing weight of solitude." Ingrid reached out, squeezing Jogda's hand with a gentle firmness. "We are right here with you, niece. You do not have to brave anything on your own ever again." Wilhelm and Eric stepped in closing ranks to form a protective ring around her. Doña Marisol retrieved an envelope from her purse. It was thicker than the previous ones. On the front, in Renata's unmistakable script, were the words, "For when you are truly free." Jogda accepted the packet with hands that trembled, breaking the seal with the reverence one might show a holy relic. Inside lay several handwritten sheets and a photograph she had never laid eyes on before. The image captured a radiant, youthful Renata cradling an infant, her face illuminated by absolute joy. Beside her, a younger Doña Marisol held them in an embrace, and on the flip side a note was scrawled. The happiest day of my life, the day my Jogda arrived. Tears began to spot the paper before she could even parse the first sentence. My beloved daughter, if this letter is in your hands, it means the miracle I always dreamed of has finally come to pass. It means you have found your kin, and you no longer have to shoulder the weight of our history in isolation. There is a truth I never shared with you, something I buried in the deepest recesses of my heart, because I lacked the words to explain it. When the diagnosis came and the doctors presented me with cold statistics and grim options, I made a choice that many would find impossible to understand. I chose to fully inhabit the time I had left rather than fading away tethered to machines chasing uncertain cures. But that was not my only resolve. I also chose to have faith to trust that even if I could not watch you mature, the universe would find a way to cradle you. To trust that the affection I poured into your earliest years would be enough to sustain you until you found a fresh source of love. To trust that one day, against all odds, you and my lost sister would find one another. I do not know how it came to be. From where I am now, I can only imagine the path. But knowing you, I am certain it was guided by your heart, by that boundless kindness I recognized the moment you first opened your eyes. Jogda, my little one, my entire life. I need you to understand this. I was never poor. Never. The world looked at my calloused working hands and saw only poverty. They looked at my modest clothes and saw deprivation. They looked at my life as an immigrant and saw only limitations. But I possessed something that many millionaires will never know. I had genuine love. I had you. Every morning I woke to your face was a gift. Every word you spoke was a melody, and every embrace was my fortune. I was the wealthiest woman on earth, Jogda, and you were my gold. Now I ask one thing of you, a mother's final wish. Live, do not merely survive. Live with your whole heart, your entire soul, and with all the fire you inherited from me, the same fire I inherited from our ancestors. Speak German without sorrow. Let every syllable be a tribute, not a wound. Love without hesitation. True love is real. I experienced it, and you deserve to experience it too. Be seen. Stop hiding in the shadows. The world has a desperate need for people like you. People who choose kindness when it would be far easier to look away. And when you have children of your own, because I know you will tell them about me. Tell them the story of us. How our broken family shattered and how we found our way back together. Tell them love outlasts clocks, miles, and even the grave. I love you, baby girl. I loved you before you even took your first breath. I loved you with every lungful of air I ever had. And I'm still loving you now, from wherever I am watching you grow into the incredible woman I always knew was in there. Yours forever, Renata Patey. Doña Marisol has one last thing for you, my final gift. Make it count. Jogda lowered the letter, sobbing uncontrollably. Ingrid was already weeping into Wilhelm's coat, while Eric quietly brushed a tear from his cheek. Even Doña Marisol, who had memorized those lines years ago, felt her composure crack. What is it? Jogda managed to choke out through her tears. What is the last gift? Marisol smiled through her own watery eyes. Your mother left you cash. Not a fortune by the world's standards, but every single penny she scraped together over the years. She made me promise to invest it, to nurture it, to hand it over only when you reached this exact moment. She pulled a folder from her bag. That savings account evolved into this. It's all in your name. Enough that you'll never have to scrape by again. Enough to make choices based on desire, not just survival. Jogda stared at the document, the numbers blurring in her vision. Her mother, who had lived on crumbs and never bought a thing for herself, had somehow built her a safety net. But money can't buy the important part, Marisol went on. Which brings me to my real question. Will you take the position at the hotel? Not as staff, as family. Because that's what you are to me, Jogda. The daughter Renata let me love from a distance all this time. Jogda stood up and nearly tackled Marisol with a hug. Yes, she whispered into her shoulder. Yes, to everything. The job, the family, the life. I'll live just like she wanted. Weeks later, the Imperial Maritime Hotel hosted a gala unlike any other. No mergers, no celebrity weddings, just something far more vital. It was a victory lap for a family put back together. The ballroom was a shrine of flowers and memories, snapshots of Renata through the years. Youthful photos of Ingrid and Wilhelm, candid shots of Jogda growing up, and front and center a portrait of two sisters who missed each other in life, finally linked by a niece's love. Ingrid, fresh out of the clinic and looking vibrant, sat beside Wilhelm. Their interlaced fingers told a story of a romance that had weathered the absolute worst storms. Eric stood by his father, the ice between them finally melted. The old grudges were gone, replaced by pure relief for a second shot at life. Doña Marisol sat at the head table, glowing with a warmth her staff had never witnessed. Next to her sat the framed photo of Renata and Joda. Joda stood up, glass in hand, ready to address the room. "Not long ago," her voice rang out steady and clear, "I was invisible. Just a shadow, scrubbing floors, swallowing my voice because I was terrified of the trouble it might cause." She shot a warm smile at Wilhelm. Then a man walked in, someone desperate, misunderstood, hunting for the love of his life. And something in me, something dormant, just woke up. Her gaze swept the room. My mother taught me German, not just as a skill, but as a bridge. She taught me that words can stitch the world back together, that they can heal rifts that seem impossible to cross. Her voice caught, but she pushed through. She never found her sister, but I did. Not because I'm special, but because I decided to stop being quiet when someone needed help. That one choice kicked off a chain reaction that brought us all here, to this family. She walked over to Ingrid and took her hands. "Auntie, you never met Mom, but she loved you every single day. Every story about Germany, every lullaby she taught me. That was her way of keeping you alive, hoping she'd find you." Tears streamed down Ingrid's face as she nodded. Joda turned back to the crowd. "I want to make a vow. To my family and to everyone here, I promise to use my voice. I promise I'm done hiding. Whenever someone needs to be understood, I'll be the bridge." She raised her glass high. "To my mother, Renata, who proved love is stronger than the grave. To Aunt Ingrid, who never stopped searching. To Wilhelm, who showed me despair can turn into hope. To Eric, who taught me heroes don't always look the part. To Doña Marisol, who kept a promise for decades without asking for a thing in return. And to anyone who's ever felt invisible, you are not alone. Someone is ready to see you. You just have to be brave enough to speak." The entire auditorium rose as one, a standing ovation viewed through a veil of happy tears. Hours later, once the dignitaries had dispersed and the suite fell quiet, Joda stepped out onto the hotel terrace. The metropolis sprawled below a grid of electricity and promise. Wilhelm joined her at the railing, his hand settling gently on her shoulder. "Your mother, she would have been beaming," he murmured in German. Joda offered a faint smile. "I know. Can you feel it? Right here." She pressed a hand over her heart. "She never truly left us. But do you know the most incredible part of all this?" Wilhelm's eyes shimmered in the ambient city light. "That I came to this foreign land chasing the ghost of my wife, yet found so much more. I reclaimed a lost son and discovered a niece I never knew existed. I found living proof that redemption is real." Yoda squeezed his hand. "And to think it all started with a cup of tea." Wilhelm chuckled softly. "No, it began with a brave woman who refused to stay silent when keeping her head down would have been the safer choice." From the warmth of the parlor, Ingrid's voice drifted out, summoning them back inside. It was time for dinner, the first of a lifetime of family meals. Joda cast one final look at the obsidian sky, certain she was watching. Her mother was smiling down. "Danke, Mama," she whispered into the night. "For the letters, the love, for believing I was worth it. I promise to live every single day with my whole heart. For you." A gentle breeze brushed against her cheek, soft as a kiss from the other side. Joda wiped her eyes and turned back toward the light, ready to join the people who were hers. She finally possessed what she had starved for but never dared to dream of: a clan, a purpose, a voice, and a love story that rose from the invisible silence of a cleaner and culminated in a chorus of unified souls, all speaking the one dialect that transcends class and borders the language of love.